Friends, hello and welcome to another episode of The Legal Breakdown. I am Jason Sansone with Sansone Howell Attorneys at Law. We are located at 4600 Southeast 29th Street in the Arvest Bank Tower. We're the 5th floor, Suite 500. We're conveniently located on Southeast 29th in Del City between Sunny Lane and Sooner Road, right next to Tinker Air Force Base. And so every week we bring you this program to help the community share some legal tips. And remember, you can always listen live on KTLV 1220 AM over terrestrial radio. That's our host station. And you can listen anywhere through the TuneIn radio app to KTLV 1220 AM. Anytime, not just our program, The Legal Breakdown, but you can listen to KTLV 1220 AM at any time on the TuneIn radio app. We simulcast live with the video stream on Facebook Live through the Sansone Howell Facebook page. And if you're not able to listen live, you can always listen after the fact to youtube.com to watch the video, or alternatively, you can watch or listen, I should say, to the program on Spotify, YouTube, Google Play directory, and what was formerly Apple iTunes. That's going to be changing here soon with some updates Apple just announced last week at WWDC, but we're going to be seeing some changes there. Friends, we've got some interesting topics today. We're going to start out with just a little bit of trivia, and we're going to go from there. So, in 1987, a movie came out that, to my knowledge, is the only movie in history which has two current or future governors in it. Pretty unique that movie had two different governors. It spawned three different sequels in 1990, 2010, and 2018, as well as two crossover films with a different franchise in 2004 and 2007. And way back in 1987, this movie had a budget of only $15 million and successfully grossed $100 million worldwide. Who are the actors? Who are the governors? And what's the movie? Well, that would be The Predator, which actually starred Arnold Schwarzenegger, future governor of California, as well as Jesse the Body Ventura as one of the other characters in that movie, who went on to be governor of Minnesota. So rather interesting that a sci-fi horror movie from 87 would have two governors in it. So we talk about that because the theme today is predators. Now, what we're going to be discussing are not dreadlocked aliens with special 3 laser dot weapons who can evaporate you and then spawn lots of terrible sequels. No, we're going to be talking predominantly about people who are looking to victimize you. They want to take your money. They want to take advantage of you. And so we've broken that down into a couple different categories that we're going to try and touch on to help you spot some of these different things. But, the leading tips, just to start the program, frankly, folks, is anytime you're dealing with a situation, be calm, be rational, and apply common sense. That if someone is threatening you, take the time to back up, validate it, or verify it. Make sure that what they're saying is real or how they're trying to do it is real. If something seems too good to be true, unfortunately, it probably is. And that if you are in a difficult spot, and we understand that with a lot of our clients, you can end up in very difficult financial situations, don't allow desperation to lead to your victimization. There are consumer protection laws for a reason. And because even though you might be willing to agree to something, and even though you say that's okay, it doesn't make it okay. And that's why we have usury interest laws. That's why we don't allow things like loan sharking. But it doesn't mean that you can't get close. And that's the problem. That's where things get worrisome, are the legal loan sharks, the ones that skirt the rules, the ones that manage to do things that they shouldn't be able to. So I want to break this down. We're going to start out with just straight up scams. These are things that are totally illegal, totally fraudulent. They're not even trying to play by anybody's rules. They purport to be something different than they are. And so we've talked about this on our show a few times previously, but you need to always be mindful that you could be looking to be victim of a scam. So what are some different scams that are going on right now that are really a problem for people and for the community? Well, on a prior program, we touched on one where former bankruptcy debtors are being scammed because you have so much information out there that's publicly available that people are able to look up. So they know your name, they know your address, they can find your phone number with relative ease. They know some of the creditors you previously had, and they call up and they pretend to be one of those legitimate creditors, and they're able to scam you out of money. There's a lot of scams out there that are pretending to be some kind of federal agency. And so whether it's the IRS or the Oklahoma Tax Commission, sometimes they pretend to be criminal enforcement agencies, law enforcement jurisdiction. This is the DEA and some of those things. And the problem is they're either completely preying on you, or alternatively, what they may be doing is they may be using just enough information to be in a situation where then they're successful in conning you. And so let me break those two different things down. Where I've got no information about you, okay, well, I just call up, I say you owe taxes, that your tax return was fraudulent or wrong. You don't know the wiser, you don't double check. They try to get you to pay them monies. That's a problem. What are some other concerns or ways that you could do it when you have a little bit of information? Well, maybe you did something that either was questionable in its legality or it wasn't wrong, but you're embarrassed by it. So and here's where this often happens. You did some kind of online transaction. You went out and you bought something, you did something, who knows what the circumstances might be. Then that information gets leaked through a hack, through a breach, however it happens. But a lot of times it's through breaches and hacks. The problem is that information ends up in the hands of evildoers. They call you up and they manage to con you out of your money. So you went online and you bought some medication or some drugs. Could be legal, could be illegal. That gets leaked. But now the scammer says, we're the DEA. You need to settle this case with us and you need to pay us. Well, they're not the DEA. That's not how the DEA works. They definitely don't call you and they say you need to pay a little money. But that's a scam. That's a common one. I've heard of people getting victimized by that. So I want everyone to be thinking about the scammers. All right. Now, number 2 in our predator list. Hopefully, this is going to be better than the 1990 Predator 2 sequel with Danny Glover, but we'll see if you think the advice is better or worse than that sequel. So I'm going to call out my peers. I'm going to attack the industry. Number 2 thing we're going to be talking about today is other lawyers. Folks, the reality of the situation is that for most people who are listening to this, for the majority of legal work done, it's local, it's grassroots, it's small firms, they're less than 10 attorneys, they have a foot in the door, they know the community, they care, and we don't have huge practice areas. You're not trying to build a national footprint, and you aren't global. Now, there are obviously excellent law firms with either regional, national, or multinational reach. There's law firms out there that are enormous. But the kind of law they do is not the kind typically being utilized by the average consumer, by the average individual out there. They're doing big business work. They're doing government interaction work, complex things that frankly means big, big bills. That's what pays to have law offices across the globe, not Chapter 7 bankruptcies, not DUI cases, not family matters of paternity, divorce, custody. There are really no multinational family law firms. And so be aware of those things that, again, are advertising heavily, that are purporting to be too good to be true. We shared on our Facebook page recently about a law firm, Upright Law, who was trying to nationally represent bankruptcy debtors. The problem is, remember, they're not really actually doing anything. They're a middleman. Then they're getting of counsel. They're hiring other people. They're passing your case along to somebody who's licensed in the jurisdiction. And that's an important point because you got to remember, one of the reasons why none of us have a big reach is because the law is different everywhere. It's hard to know that much information, and it's almost impossible to be licensed in all those different places. So even if I wanted to go set up shop in Texas, Arkansas, Missouri, Kansas, Colorado, I'd have to take and pass the bar. And even if I did that, that doesn't mean I know anything. I've got to learn all that information. We're happy to be good at what we do in Oklahoma, let alone trying to be good at it in multiple places. So you don't see a lot of people that have such a broad reach. And so when Upright Law was advertising and then taking on clients, they weren't really handling the matters themselves. They're simply a referral service. So you're paying the machine that in essence is doing nothing other than spending money on good advertising. So be aware of that. But at the end of the day, they got slapped down by the Department of Justice and had to pay tons of money in fines and disgorgements and fees because they weren't even doing the job. That what they were supposed to be doing wasn't being done for the clients. It's the same thing with the advertising for, $200 divorce or $100 no contest divorces. Those probably aren't lawyers. You're probably dealing with paralegals or just somebody who's preparing the docs. If you're dealing with attorneys, they're not going to represent you. They're just going to hand you a stack of pre-canned paperwork that doesn't necessarily fit your circumstances. So be aware of all those things. There are criminal defense attorneys out there who are happy to take a case for virtually no money, but they're also going to withdraw at the first drop of the hat. And so, frankly, you're renting them. And I'm not trying to be ugly to anybody, but that's the facts. I'm not going to name drop, but there's some lawyers in Oklahoma County. You could walk up to do a $100 handshake at any time on any criminal case docket, and they're going to hop in your case. And then next time, when you've got a case that comes up again on the docket for the next continuance of the other hearing, if you're not ready to do another $100 handshake, they're going to tell the judge they're out of your case. They were never your lawyer. They're not in it like a regular attorney. They're not working all the facts. They're not reviewing the materials. They're not asking for evidence and discovery. They're not negotiating with the DA. They're not pushing for the best plea or dismissal. You're buying a continuance, which is kicking the can down the curb. Is that necessary for some people? Maybe. Maybe it's good that we have that option available for people depending on socioeconomics and demographics. But the fact is, that's not the kind of representation you need or want. That what you need, without question, is always going to be a lawyer who will do their ethical duty to zealously advocate for you. And so we advise, be aware of lawyers that are too good to be true, without question. All right. Well, we're moving along. We're about halfway into our program. So let's touch on the next areas we want to talk about, and that is lenders. And I'm going to break lenders down into sort of 3 categories, or maybe 2 categories, and one of them's got 2 subcategories, depending on how you want to look at this. But we're going to start out with the easy, the simple, local lenders. So the payday loans, the signature loans, your brick and mortar places you walk into and you borrow money. Here's the good news about them. They're very likely compliant with Oklahoma state law because they have a footprint, they're going to be licensed, they're going to be registered, and they're going to play by the rules. The other good thing is that if they act out of line, me or any other attorney knows where they are, and it's a lot easier to put them in their place. If I need to drag you in front of a judge and get you straightened out and make sure you understand things like bankruptcy rules, I can do that. So the fact is, out of all these things we're going to talk about, if I had to pick, I would pick the local lenders. Now, I'd pick for none of them to exist, frankly, and I would advise you to never, ever, ever do business with any of these people or borrow money from any of these predators. However, if I had a choice, this is the lesser of 3 evils, the local guys are going to play by the rules. But those rules are still lax. The amount that they can charge in interest is still obscene. And the hole that you will quickly get yourself in legally is deep. Because once you're not able to pay, you're in default, they can sue you. They can use small claims. They can set it on a docket. They can get a judgment. And then they can try to satisfy that judgment, which would include wage garnishments, which in Oklahoma means they could take 25% of your check. And that usually then means you're turning around and calling a bankruptcy attorney like me. These are all worrisome things. So we want to work the best we can to absolutely avoid high interest predatory lending, specifically anything we're about to list. The ones from here get worse, but folks, don't go to these places. Don't go to the World Acceptance Course, the Red River Credit, the Tinker Finance, not to be confused with Tinker Financial Credit Union. Got no beef with TFCU. The cash lending, Cash Express, check cashing. Sorry to name drop all these places, but folks, don't use them. I don't care if they're the most legally compliant one in the state. The best is still the worst. They're going to sink their teeth into you. Their job is not to be your friend. Their job is to loan you money at ridiculous rates that somehow we still legally allow. It might be legal. It doesn't make it ethical, and it doesn't make it moral, and it doesn't make it right. So now, the last two categories, both of which fall into online lending. So the online lending is a whole different ball of wax. And that's why we've saved a lot of our time on the program to talk about online lending. I mentioned and went in depth when I talked about local how I prefer them. And the reason being, again, is it's easy to find them. It's easy to know who they really are. They've got a storefront. If I need to straighten you out, I can do so. I can serve you. I can get a judge to know where you're at. I can get a sheriff to drag you into court. I can't do that with the online lenders. And they usually hide behind that anonymity. You're lucky if you can get any information about them, if you can even get an email address, a fax number, a physical address, who they're registered with. Some of these nowadays are international. They're coming out of Canada. They're coming out of various Caribbean islands. Well, folks, if they take your money or they do something wrong or they break the law, it's borderline impossible to catch up with them. I can't refer them to the state attorney general, the Oklahoma Department of Consumer Credit, and explain the laws they broke. Nobody, it's a game of whack-a-mole. That's the exact phrase from the Department of Consumer Credit the last time I spoke to them and with their general counsel, that they're just lucky to continue to put out the fires, and every time you put one out, another one pops up. For every lender that's breaking the law that they can squash, there's going to be another one. So these international are scary. It gets into questions of legality and illegality. I want to share a little bit of a story about how bad this can be with a current client we have. She was in a tough spot. She borrowed some money. The company is based in Georgia, and what they're doing, the best I can tell, best it looks like, is totally legal in Georgia. Now, that's scary for those Georgians, and I would strongly encourage you to pass some consumer protection laws, but it's purporting to be a pawn transaction. So it's actually a title loan. So she uses her car as collateral. They get a perfected lien with the Oklahoma Tax Commission on her vehicle, which means that if she doesn't pay, they could repo and take the car. But folks, this loan is $1,750 with 300% interest. Every month she has to pay $430 just to pay the interest alone, and make that never would reduce the balance. That's without touching the principal interest-bearing balance. And so at $430 a month on a $1,750 loan, she would be paying into infinity. Again, that's legal in Georgia. Don't ask me why. But it's not legal here. If you want to conduct a pawn transaction in Oklahoma, you got to be licensed with the Oklahoma Department of Consumer Credit. You got to be compliant with the Oklahoma Pawn Shop Act, and that means you've got to make sure that the interest rates are lawful. And we don't have a flat rate in that manner. We have a sliding scale based on the amount you're borrowing. So as the more and more money goes up, the amount of interest you could collect goes down. So the 300% on $1,750 is definitely in violation of the Oklahoma Pawnshop Act, so our laws. But again, this was all done online. This person's never been to Georgia, never lived in Georgia, never set foot in Georgia. So we're fighting them. It's a big pending, looming battle inside of a bankruptcy case, and we're working to make it right. But not everyone's going to have lawyers that can spot these issues or aware, or they're willing to go to bat and fight this stuff. Because I'll be honest, we're not charging for it. We're not likely to recover attorney's fees. We're doing it just because it's right, because that's insanity to pay $430 every month forever on a $1,750 loan, and if you default, then they get to take your car. That's crazy. She's paid off the loan amount over and over, multiple times over. So, folks, that's an example of a legal in Georgia loan and illegal in Oklahoma online loan. You got to watch out for that kind of stuff. But hunting these people down's headache. You know, I can't find their registration with the Oklahoma or the Georgia Secretary of State. They're not registered with the Oklahoma Secretary of State. They're not registered with the Oklahoma Department of Consumer Credit. And again, Georgia's got virtually no laws about this stuff. Okay. Then we talked about international issues. And so there's sometimes we've got these lenders in Canada. We get lenders in Caribbean islands like the Caymans or Jamaica, Barbados, whatever. Because anybody can set up a web server anywhere, right? It's not hard to take a computer, plug it into the internet, and ta-da, I'm lending money online and I have a business. The predators, folks. Here's the worst. I'm telling you, it's the worst. It's a concept called rent-a-tribe. It's intentionally, that expression is meant to be very derisive, and I use it very derisively. Sovereign Indian nations are not technically subject to all of the laws of the United States, and they are not subject to the laws of the state that the tribe's sovereign land sits in. Most of us are familiar with this, either implicitly or explicitly, in Oklahoma because of our casinos. So if you want to set up a gambling operation in Oklahoma, that is illegal. You can't run one out of your house. You can't start a casino down the street. If anybody remembers from about 6 years ago, in El Reno, several establishments were busted because they had gambling, gaming devices that were not on a reservation land. You could go to El Reno. There were several different bars and gas stations, and they had basically slot machines and various electronic devices. They got in a lot of trouble because it was illegal. I'm not really sure why they thought they could have them there. Maybe they thought they were on reservation land. I don't remember all the facts of the case. The point of the story is you can't gamble in Oklahoma. But obviously there's gambling, air quotes, in Oklahoma. I couldn't even begin to list all the different places. We've got Fire Lake and Concho and Riverwind and Windstar, and the list goes on of the number of casinos in the state of Oklahoma. They're on Indian land. They're on reservations. So they're able to do that. And not just are they able to do that, that means they also are able to do various lending, both in person or online, that would not otherwise be legal. So we talked about in Oklahoma, we've got these various laws, the Oklahoma Department of Consumer Credit, for example, pawn shops, you got the Oklahoma Pawnshop Act, you got various lending rules. None of that's applicable to rent-a-tribes. So what is rent-a-tribe? Why do I keep calling it that? Oftentimes, the tribe themselves is not who's actually the lender, if you will. It's somebody who's a lender that's paying for the right to operate on sovereign tribal land. They pay a licensing fee or a percentage of profits, or they operate under the name of the tribe, or maybe they simply are a contractor and they help the tribe in to conduct these types of businesses. But the tribes themselves didn't have this idea to set out to basically take advantage of every white man in the United States. No, the white man decided to take advantage of the white man and to find a way to profit. They used the tribes along the way. That has been a problem for a while because they will lend to virtually anyone under virtually any circumstances, and they charge interest rates that are in violation of every other consumer law. They have ways of collecting, and we're going to touch on in a minute a concept of pocket judgment or consent judgments. Those are problematic, but they're so hard. like I said, if they do something right or wrong, it doesn't matter. There's no way to get a hold of them. The other thing is that almost always they're asking up front and obtaining the ability to collect from you, such as they're taking automatic debits and drafts out of your bank account. Well, how do we get that turned off if we want to get it to stop? Even if I serve them with notice of a bankruptcy and they keep dinging your account, well, it might be a violation of the automatic stay under the bankruptcy rules, but I got to find you and I got to stop you. You might dispute it with your bank. They charge you a service fee. Well, you could just let it overdraft. You're paying a service fee. You could close your account altogether, but that's a pain. So these are difficult issues where I tell you be very careful with the information you put out there, who you talk to, who you borrow money from. Be aware of the rent-a-tribes. And then last, rent-a-tribes do this some, as well as cash advance companies, and mostly this is coming out of the state of New York. That is consent judgment. Well, what the heck is a consent judgment? We've talked at times on our show previously about the process for civil litigation. In a nutshell, somebody files a lawsuit against you, then they're going to serve you with that. You're going to go through the process of pleadings, or maybe it's small claims and you just have to show up. But if it's a pleadings process, then you're going to end up, we're going to have motions, we're going to have answers, we're going to have discovery. But let's just say eventually you lose. Then the lender, the creditor, has won, and they have a judgment, and then they have to go out and try to enforce that judgment. They're going to use the different laws of the state to collect. So maybe it's a recurring wage garnishment, 25% of your gross in Oklahoma. Some states like Texas don't allow that. It's against the Texas state constitution. Maybe they want to seize property, any non-exempt property you have. You got a boat, they could take it. You got 3 cars, they take the third one. These are some ways to satisfy the judgment. But we explained that the whole point, obviously, of having this process of due process is to protect you, to make sure they have to go to court to prove you owe the money, to verify, to let you use any valid defenses that you might have. A consent judgment is when you sign a piece of paper as part of the lending that out of the gate says you already are agreeing to a final order judgment. It's skip go. It's do not collect $200. There's no lawsuit whatsoever. You've already lost before you started, and then the minute you get sideways with them, they sink their teeth into you. They've already got their claws in you. Never, ever, 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 ever sign one of those. They're not legal in most states, but it doesn't matter if you're doing it in a state that is legal, like New York. Which, by the way, I'm going to take just 2 seconds to harp on a political issue. Why is it that a state like New York, who has the most outrageously obnoxious liberal governor in the country, who wants to make it their business to sue anyone and everyone for any little issue they think is ridiculous and try to enforce their concept of consumer protection laws, would then simultaneously allow these absolutely egregious, arcane, historic lending laws? And we know the answer. Money, lobbying. Because these companies are outrageous. They're paying off politicians, including those in the state of New York, but it's absolutely stupid. Most states don't allow this kind of stuff. They shouldn't either. Be aware of it. So, final thing we're going to touch on, and then I'm going to let you go. These predators, guys, again, you got to be aware of them. You got to watch out. Use your common sense. If you have questions, find someone who has no problem answering those questions for you. Specifically, I'm always happy to. We take calls from the public. You can call our law firm, 405-455-1032. If it doesn't seem right, get it in writing, verify it. Somebody says they've got a lawsuit against you, look up that case number, oscn.net or odcr.net in Oklahoma. We'll let you verify that. I've talked before about how crazy it is. They don't even often use case numbers that are real systems. They don't even line up with Oklahoma case styling. So that's an immediate giveaway, folks. Friends, it's been a great episode. We are just about out of time. We've used all of it up. I had a few more things to touch on. We'll go over it in a future episode. Be safe. Be weather aware. We continue to have all sorts of crazy rain this year. I'm Jason Sansone. This has been The Legal Breakdown.